Right, it is new Volkswagen Golf time, and that's very exciting because just like an Apple iPhone, this is a product that has been designed to appeal to literally everyone. Why is that exciting? Well, just like a frozen ice core from the North Pole or a time capsule, this car sums up exactly where the motor industry is right now, and more importantly, exactly what it is that car buyers like us want from their cars. Now, the Golf achieves this by being just a little bit better in all those key areas than its rivals. Others might be a little bit more fun to drive or perhaps a bit more practical, but altogether the Golf is the better car. So what does this new Golf tell us about what it is people want from their cars? Well, for a start, it's not an SUV and it's no longer electric. That job has been passed on to the ID.3, which comes out in 2020. Clearly that means there's still a core of car buyers that want what the old Golf offered, but with slightly lower running costs and more tech. That's exactly what you get in the VW Golf this time around. There's a simply enormous amount of engine choice, whether it's petrol, diesel, mild hybrid or plug-in hybrid, and performance versions of all of those, which will follow later. Volkswagen says that this time round its best performing engines are up to 17% more efficient, and its ever popular 2-litre TDI produces 80% less NOx thanks to a clever new AdBlue system. Like I said before, there's no electric Golf this time around, which is kind of sad because the last one was such an easy thing to get on with. We mustn't dwell on that because there's a simply bewildering amount of choice for this car. Not only are there more traditional 3 and 4 cylinder 1 litre or 1.5 litre petrol engines, there's also a 2 litre diesel. New to the range this time around is a 48 volt mild hybrid system that works with the 1.5 litre petrol engine. This comes with a DSG gearbox as standard and promises much lower running costs than the standard 1.5 litre petrol. If you're after even lower running costs, then there are actually 2 plug-in hybrid models to choose from this time around, although we only get one of them. There's a 204 horsepower plug-in and the 245 horsepower GTE. Now, we've driven the petrol and the diesel on the launch of the Mark 8 Golf, and to be honest with you, this 150 horsepower 2 litre diesel is absolutely everything you could want from your Golf. It's got plenty of power and torque, and it's smooth and really quiet too. You can have that 2 litre TDI with a 6-speed manual gearbox or with a 7-speed DSG automatic like I've got here. There's not really much to say about either of those. They're both, frankly, as brilliant as they've always been. The automatic's particularly good in that it's very smooth when you want it to be, and then if you want to do some more sort of sporty dynamic driving, it can also shift very quickly too. One big difference with the DSG gearbox this time around is the fact that you no longer get the big kind of clunky mechanical gear shift in the centre console. That's been replaced by this electronic switch in the Mark 8 Golf, and that's a little bit like what we've seen in Porsche recently too. It's perhaps a little bit harder to get a hold of, but then to be honest, you're not really going to be doing that when you're driving anyway, and the fact that it's smaller and doesn't require any kind of mechanical gubbins under it means it unlocks quite a lot of storage space in this part of the centre console, so that's a good thing. That does quite handily bring me on to what is perhaps the biggest change in the Mark 8 Golf, and that is in the interior, where the more traditional analogue dials have been replaced by 2 big screens, and all the buttons that you used to get around here have all been tidied up into these sort of multi-function touch controls and this slidey thing here that does all sorts of things. What's nice is that all of that actually comes as standard, so you get a 12.25 inch virtual cockpit sort of dial screen that you've got there, and then the main 10-inch infotainment screen on the right. Volkswagen is calling this its InnoVision cockpit, and that's a term that obviously we've heard before in the Touareg. That system features 2 big screens that don't appear to have any kind of divide between the two. It just looks like one big wide screen that goes across the cabin. This is not quite as effective as that, but it does have an awful lot of real estate on those screens there to display all sorts of useful things. The overall effect is really nice actually, thanks to that reduced button count. It doesn't really feel like you've lost any of the kind of functions that you would have from all of those buttons. They've all just been tidied up into little groups, so you've got all your lights and kind of your fog lights and the bit to demist the windscreen over here, that's all kind of clustered together, and then you've got things like your climate control, or the driver assist, and how to get into the drive mode as well, which is all kind of in this cluster below the screen here. Those keys kind of work like shortcuts to sub-menus on the main screen, so if you press the climate control button, for instance, it opens up another menu on the main screen there where you've got more buttons for things like putting on your heated seat or turning up the temperature or turning the auto air conditioning off, and it works the same for kind of drive mode. You press that one, all the drive mode options appear on the screen as well. So although there are fewer buttons, you haven't really lost any of the control that you had from the old car. Connectivity has been given a bit of a boost in the Mark 8 Golf, so you get wireless Bluetooth Apple CarPlay now, and you still get Android Auto too, although you need to use a wire for that. You also get a system called WeConnect Plus, which gives you access via your smartphone to things like the service history, the ability to lock and unlock the car, and to pre-program the climate control. Here are 4 innovative features of the 8th generation Golf's interior. The panoramic roof can be opened and closed by a swipe of this touch control in the roof. This swipe panel can be used to alter the stereo volume, climate control temperature and even the heated seats using different types of gesture. VW's Hey Volkswagen voice control can understand contextual questions. Special microphones detect where you're sitting, so if the driver asks for warmer feet, only the climate on that side of the car is changed. Ambient lighting can be customised in 3 different zones on the upper, middle and lower sections of the interior. This gives you a huge range of colour schemes and effects, as well as some neat pre-programmed settings too. Now, the one area that you could always criticise a Volkswagen Golf on was the way that it drove. That's not to say that it was a particularly bad handling car, far from it. It was very grippy, very confident, but it was never the most fun experience in the world. In a lot of ways that was a good thing because it meant it didn't have to compromise on things like everyday usability and comfort and things like that. This time around, Volkswagen says it's worked on widening the bandwidth of the car's ability, which is to say it's more comfortable at the comfortable end and more fun to drive at the sporty end. It's achieved this as you would expect by using a load of tech, and that's good, but it's also bad because it means that some Golfs are going to handle quite well and others are going to handle not quite as well. Like a great many of its rivals, the Volkswagen Golf now offers you 2 types of rear axle depending on which model you buy. Those with under 150 horsepower get a torsion beam, and those with over 150 horsepower or 4MATIC all-wheel drive, which is basically the Golf R, get a proper multi-link setup. Elsewhere, there are 3 systems that Volkswagen says are going to improve the way that the Golf handles. That is XDS brake-based torque vectoring, dynamic chassis control adaptive dampers, and progressive steering. We'll get on to what those do in a minute, but it's worth noting that we don't really know what the UK spec is going to be yet. There's a suggestion that all 3 of those things kind of group together, so it's quite likely that perhaps they'll either come as standard on the base spec car, which is just called Golf this time around, or they'll be in some kind of driving pack that you add on. What makes the Mark 8 Golf different from the last car is that there's a system that makes all of those 3 things talk to each other, so they work in harmony, rather than one sort of putting in an input that conflicts with something else that the other wants to do. Once again, that's kind of an idea that we've seen in Porsche before, and that system is called 4D chassis control, and that works very well. In a Golf, that means those systems can work together to make sure all 4 tyres have got as much grip as possible, and that power is sent to the wheel that can best use it. What's nice is that unlike a more rudimentary traction control system that's just going to slow you down when it thinks you're driving too fast, all of those things in the Golf work together kind of unobtrusively behind the scenes to just leave the car with a really good sense of balance and grip. You get a real sense of that wider range of abilities that Volkswagen says it's given the Golf this time around. It is super comfortable at the comfortable end, and while it's not going to rival a 911 GT3 at the sporty end, it is quite fun to drive thanks to that confidence-inspiring level of grip. It's also not particularly fair to judge the ultimate handling characteristics of the Mark 8 VW Golf on this 2-litre everyday diesel model. It'd be better to wait until the GTI TCR or the R to do that. What this model needs to do is just be incredibly easy to use every day, and as far as I'm concerned, it gets a massive tick in that department. The Mark 8 Golf then does everything that its predecessor did so well, a little bit better, with the added flexibility of a massive engine range and a much more modern, high-tech interior. In terms of practicality, there hasn't been the biggest change because, frankly, there didn't need to be. The last Golf had a really good boot, and so does this. It certainly feels a little bit sharper to drive this time around, but I still think the Ford Focus is better. The problem is you're only going to get to use that in maybe 1 out of 10 drives, and for the rest of the time, the Volkswagen Golf is still the benchmark when it comes to a practical, spacious, comfortable, everyday 5-door hatchback.